So, I finally played a Splatoon game. And you know what? It was pretty decent. I'm not normally much of a shooter person, but I could see myself getting into this. That being said, while the character designs are certainly cool and unique, I'll be honest, they weird me out just a little bit. Like seriously, call me a mammal supremacist or whatever, but cephalopods should not be walking around on 2 feet like this. So what if they didn't? Is it possible to beat Splatoon 3 without walking? Now you may be wondering, what exactly does this ban on bipedal locomotion mean? What exactly does it mean to try to beat the game without walking? Is this a no left stick challenge? Well, no, it's not. What this challenge is all about is only using the left stick while in squid/octopus form. We can still use our humanoid form to shoot and the like, but we can't use the left stick to move while in humanoid form. So I hope that explanation was clear enough. If we can beat Splatoon 3 story mode without breaking those previously described rules, then we can consider this challenge a success. So let's get into this. Our first hurdle to overcome is character creation. Luckily, I've got you guys to help me out, so by popular demand, in Octoling it is. Now we're faced with the tutorial area, which I'm honestly not sure whether or not it should even count for a challenge, since it's not technically part of the story mode. Whatever, let's just see what it's all about. Camera controls are no problem. Next up, movement controls. Luckily the tutorial doesn't lock us out of octopus mode right now, so we can crawl along the ground, no problem. Shooting as well presents no issue. We just need to make sure we remember not to move and shoot simultaneously. And of course this tutorial area is a great place to get a handle on how exactly we're going to be playing this game going forward. We stand up, shoot some ink, then go back down, swim through the ink, stand up, shoot some ink, and, repeat. Taking, of course, very special care to not move while you shoot, because that would make you walk, which, of course, is against the rules for this challenge. And there we go. With the tutorial behind us, it's time to head into the story mode. There, Captain Cuttlefish alerts us to the Octarian threat, which, I take as personally offensive and xenophobic, for obvious reasons. But whatever, if the pay is good enough, I'm in. Well, beggars can't be choosers, I guess. On to level 1. Which honestly isn't much more difficult than the tutorial. Although after its completion, we do encounter one minor problem. The issue is that after finishing the level, we're spit out on top of the level entrance. Now we can't walk off it because that would of course be a flagrant violation of our challenge's rules, but simultaneously we can't go into octopus mode while standing on it because then we would fall through the grate and back into the level. Quite the quandary. Luckily there is a relatively simple solution, and that solution is simply going to the map screen and jumping back to Camp Cuttlefish. And there we go. Problem solved. Now we're ready to let little buddy do his thing and progress to level 2. And honestly, no problems here. The level is practically built around swimming in octopus mode. Level 3 is also pretty easy. Level 4 is where we really codify our preferred combat strategy. Stealthing around by swimming in our ink, and then when the moment is right, boom! Pop up and obliterate our enemies at close range. It works pretty well in this level at least. And speaking of combat, it's time for our first boss fight, DJ Octavio. First things first, we covered just about the entire boss arena in ink for mobility purposes. That works great for phase 1, but we don't quite get the same prep time for the following phases. That makes for a much more hectic dodge-filled phases 2 and 3, as we splatter the ground as effectively as we can between the attacks, while also having to make sure little buddy takes care of the vacuum, and, getting our hits in on the hands when they present themselves. One mercy is the fact that we can just take a hit and be more or less fine, which makes counterattacking a significantly simpler prospect. Ultimately, we win the fight, landing us in the strange new realm of Alterna. Now, progression through Alterna is interesting, to say the least. That's because most of the levels are fundamentally optional. Basically, you have physical progression, which is based on getting enough power eggs to dispel certain patches of fuzzy ooze. The curious thing is that since power eggs are completely fungible, you can in theory save a bunch from earlier levels in order to skip later ones. Additionally, much of the ooze is not necessary to dispel in the first place. A lot of it is just hiding bonus collectibles or extra levels. But then there's another form of progression, the progression of your gear. To upgrade your gear, you need to get upgrade points, which as far as I could tell, just seem to accumulate as you play the game. The real bottleneck seems to be Sardinium, which is hidden throughout Alterna, usually locked behind some of those optional fuzzy oozes I mentioned earlier. I'll be honest, a lot of the upgrades I don't really care for, but the ones that relate to the hero shot I would actually like to get to fairly quickly. To that end, here in site number 1, we'll be hitting up just about as many levels as we can find. Starting with Get to Know Alterna, your only choice. Yeah, the level names are a bit of a mouthful in this game. Anyway, the level itself is no problem. What caused the Big Bang? You can be played completely normally. Relic Restoration is a bit more stop and start than normal, but not too hard. Deadly Dance Hall Jump Jump was quite difficult, especially towards the end. I'm not sure how much easier it would have been if I wasn't an octopus the whole time, but at the very least for this challenge, it all boiled down to knowing when to do small jumps over single shockwaves, and when to fully commit to clearing several in a single bound. Also, not getting too greedy for eggs was important. Octopods at rest tend to flip out was a relatively simple affair with the Splatbrella. The gun really packs a punch, allowing standing your ground to be a quite viable strategy. Which is good, because running while shooting is something we can't do. The String's the Thing is basically a tutorial for the Tri-Stringer. You'd think that would mean the level would be pretty easy. You would think wrong. Remember how I was just talking about how the Splatbrella packs a big punch? Yeah, the Tri-Slinger doesn't so much. The best way to get that sort of punch is to let your shot charge for a while. Now that wouldn't be so much of a problem if we could engage in evasive maneuvers while our shot charged. Unfortunately in this challenge, since we can't walk, the only thing to do while charging a shot is just stand motionlessly, absorbing enemy fire like a sponge. Also, I'm not sure what I was doing wrong, but the ending part I couldn't figure out what the clever way to dispatch these enemies was supposed to be, so I just stood behind some cover and brute forced it. Oh well, made it past at least. Zip, Splat, and Jump is next up, which basically lets us be Spider Octoing, which is good fun, though it does provide a bit of a rules technicality argument, which we'll get into now. Basically, it boils down to whether or not we're allowed to jump from hanging off a wall and still be within the rules. My answer is yes, so long as we activate Octopus mode before attempting to press the left stick to move while airborne. So following that rule, level itself is pretty easy. Become one with your small fry. I honestly don't think it's changed too much by the rules of our challenge. Splat You on the flip side actually is quite difficult on account of the sheer quantity of enemies. Until you stop being stupid and realize that the Splatbrella has an umbrella shield included with it that can make it an even better weapon to use when bravely standing your ground. Doors, 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 and more doors is a bit of a confusing labyrinth. But what's truly concerning is this great bridge. The issue? Well, in Octopus mode you fall straight through such a structure, which is obviously not exactly helpful when in order to get through the level you find yourself having to cross said structure. So what can we do other than just skipping the level? Well, standing isn't against our rules, and neither is jumping from a standing position. So, what I decided to do here was engage in a delicate maneuver where I jumped, transformed into Octopus mode, then moved a bit while airborne before stopping and landing standing upright. Like I said, it's a bit of a delicate operation, but still technically follows the rules, and succeeds in getting us across, thus letting us complete the level. And that's actually the last level we'll be playing here on the first site. Like I said, we didn't have to play nearly as many as we did, but I wanted to get a good head start on the upgrades. And as far as that goes, mission accomplished as far as I'm concerned. Now to the second site. After a little run-in with these here marauders. Okay, now to the second site. First up, twirling, swirling, and whirling, which is actually quite trivial so long as we exhibit enough patience. I mean, this level basically gives us dedicated windows to go stealth mode on these fools, so we take advantage. Next up, Absorbency and You, which features some of the most interesting combat encounters we've seen up to this point. These are scenarios with so many Octarians that just going in guns blazing isn't really an option for us. But with sponges around, which we can build up into cover from which we can have comfortable bases from which to launch our stealth missions, it's certainly surmountable, and it's really just plain fun. The ink conservation project you'd think would be right up our alley since we're generally so efficient with our ink usage in our precision stealth-focused gameplay. And honestly, you'd be more or less right in that assessment. Then switching things up is very easy. Soak It To Me is another example of a level that lets us construct some cover for ourselves, which makes it fun and not too difficult. Also easy, Getting Lost in 3 Easy Steps. A level that certainly isn't easy is Splitting Crosshairs. With the slusher anyway. I don't even think it was a challenge thing, since basically the whole level takes place on rails, which our challenge doesn't affect, like, at all. Once I switched to the Jet Squelcher, I succeeded in one attempt. Now is when we proceed to the Future Stares Back, the boss fight of Site 2, with a whole 2 more upgrades since we left Site 1. Although they are actually quite good upgrades, Suit Recovery Up and Ninja Squid to be precise. But to even get to this level, we do need to cross another Great Bridge. Same strategy as before works, it's just mildly annoying, so I figured I'd bring it up. Anyway, now it's just us versus Fry and her eels. And let's just start with the fundamentals. Movement in a boss fight of this nature is a wee bit difficult since we so heavily rely on swimming through friendly ink to have decent movement speed. Not just that, and I don't think I've explicitly mentioned this yet, but we literally cannot move through enemy ink because, well, you can't swim through it. If you try, you get forced to start walking. And let me tell you, if there's one thing these eels can do, it is absolutely coat the field in their color. And actually, while we're on the topic, this whirlpool, which is often responsible for the absolute coating, is a devastating attack. I'm honestly still not really sure what you're supposed to do against it. Oh, or apparently I do. Well, between that and having overcome the 100 eel vision attack earlier, in spite of, being a bit of a sitting duck when you're shooting at the eels, we're on phase 3 now, which means we've got to somehow send back 9 eels within the duration of a single attack. Can't say I was looking forward to this. Although, our super move, which we've been saving up, is actually very effective against the Great Moray transformation. Now let's just not squander the opportunity. And there we go! That's another boss down. Hopefully they don't continue this trend of being harder each time. So I guess that is just what a difficulty curve is, now that I think about it. Anyway, on to Site 3. But first, we'll visit Tread Heavily, which is actually really fun and easy thanks to the crab tank. Now we go to Site 3. And skip all the levels in it. Like I said, a lot of the levels in this game are optional, including all of Site 3. Now as for Site 4, it starts off with another Great Bridge. Although this one you can just die on and the game will place you safely on the other side. I'll take it. Now let's take a look at Propellered to Greatness. It's honestly nothing revolutionary. Octohoppers don't have a sense of humor, and they hate puns, is next, and is thoroughly beaten by our amazing stealth attacks. Those Aren't Birds is a level I tried, but got annoyed with and gave up on. You have to shoot this flying target several times, and it's just annoying to get at while making sure you keep moving and shooting as 2 completely separate and distinct modes of being. But hey, plenty of fish in the sea, as they say. Let's put a pin in that, will be our alternative level. It's also no walk in the park, since you often find yourself having to quickly swap from inking a path to traveling on said path before you get crushed, and or your path is re-inked by a foe, but luckily this challenge I was indeed up for. And that's actually enough to get us access to the Pursuit of the Precious, Site 4's boss fight. After crossing another Great Bridge, like seriously, how often is this nuisance going to come up? Oh, and by the way, we've gotten another upgrade to our Hero Shot to help us through. Nice. Now, how about this boss fight? Well, on the one hand, I do appreciate how Shiver and Master Mega can be hit basically at any time during the fight. What I don't like is how they're near constantly circling the arena, making it rather annoying to hit them while stuck standing still when you shoot. But honestly, overall, this fight, I'd have to say, was actually a bit easier than the one against Fry and the Eels. You know what else is easy? Site 5's Simply Zip-tastic, zipping over the neighborhood, and Shooter on Rails. Site 6's Torture Tour happens to be a bit more difficult. You have to deal with a good quantity of enemies, often placed in positions that make them tough to sneak up on. But ultimately, if you use the terrain and cover to your advantage, you can prevail. And that brings us to the Obscurus Chioscurist, the boss fight of Site 6. Otherwise known as the most annoying boss from Super Mario Sunshine. Luckily, it's not as hard here as it was there. I have 2 tips for this boss fight. Tip number 1, when things get dicey, shoot at your feet. And tip number 2, when things get really dicey, swim clear to the other side of the arena to get a couple seconds to catch your breath. And that just about does the trick. So now what? Glad you asked. Now it's time to assault the rocket and finish this. But first, here's a final look at the upgrades I scrounged together over the course of this challenge. It's not particularly impressive, but I got the ones most important to me, and overall I think we should have enough. I guess we'll see though. Phase 1 of the infiltration is done completely unarmed. It's just us and Little Buddy versus the world. This does put us at a not insignificant disadvantage compared to a normal playthrough, since without weapons we can't effectively create ink for us to swim through, thus greatly hampering our movement speed. Luckily that isn't too relevant in this level. What is relevant is this incredible timing of a throw and some more grates to do our weird jumping technique over. Phase 2 is just plain fun, getting to use loads of different super weapons to annihilate our foes. Stealth actually ends up being more effective than one might have expected in Phase 3. Until the Octolings showed up, that is. These girls are ruthless! But in their aggression was opportunity to counterattack, which I took advantage of, thereby getting through. Phase 4 was a slog. The rolling ball Octarians are so annoying to deal with, and if you don't successfully, well, welcome to your death. But you know what really irked me? The fact that I got +1 upgrade point, which the game did not let me forget. I know I have an upgrade point! Just get off the screen already, please! It never did get off the screen. Not until the beginning of Phase 5. Which is just some spider octoing fun. Now it's time to face the antagonist of this whole adventure, Mr. Grizz, and stop him from enacting Hairmageddon.
Please note that Mr. Grizz does not currently and has never endorsed the use of the term Hairmageddon to describe his project to restore mammals to their rightful place on the Earth. Any use of the term by CMeeCraft Gaming is a flagrant disregard for the wishes of Grizzco and will be met with legal action shortly. Should any of you viewers use this term, thus harming Grizzco's brand, you may expect a cease and desist in the mail within 5 to 10 business days. Consider yourself warned.
And oh boy, this is definitely the hardest boss we've faced. The constant barrage of projectiles keeps you on your toes. The rotating spaceship is an absolute nightmare for us, since it leaves us with the choice of either moving too slow in Octavus mode and falling off, or stopping to shoot a path to swim through, and by stopping, ending up too slow. I took a third option, no stopping to ink, but yes jumping while in Octopus form, which did just the trick. And it all culminates in this third phase of the fight, where Mr. Grizz attacks with even stronger moves with an even greater frequency. Truly, it is a worthy test of all we've been through as we swim and dive through this total minefield, ultimately landing the final blow and entering Phase 4. Which honestly plays out basically how it would normally, aside from this last wave of enemies being a bit more troublesome to deal with. I mean, ultimately piloting a spaceship doesn't really require walking as it turns out, so naturally we prevail, thus proving it is possible to beat Splatoon 3 without walking. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd be curious to know if you'd like to see me try this challenge on the previous Splatoon games. If so, leave a comment. But in general, don't forget to like, subscribe, ring that bell, and if you really want to support the channel and get some fun perks for your trouble, consider backing the Patreon like these fine individuals on screen, particularly our $15 tier patron, Enigmatic Mr. L. But anyways guys, until next time, I have been CMeeCraft, and I will catch you in the next video, coming this fall. Goodbye.